had visited out here.
Private Island.
Hi, Robin. It's Lucas.
Hi.
It was more scary just to be out of college. I think that more so than moving to Los Angeles. You're a kid and you live at home, and then you go to college, and then you go out into the world. So it was more the transition of going out to the world than figuring out LA freeways, which I sort of knew how to do a little bit. In my back chair.
When I first met Lucas Kendall, I was astonished at how young he was. I mean, this was a guy who just finished college, and he was this intensely pursuing magazine moguldom.
Private Island.
Hi, it's Lucas outside.
Come on in.
He was publishing, editing, and seemingly writing half of a monthly magazine.
Reality TV today.
Lucas was the first guy that I met, and probably to this day the guy that I know the least. He's very, very driven, but he's also very internal. For somebody that's involved with the arts, he doesn't spend a lot of time pontificating about the beauty of this or that. You know, you can get, it's pretty cool. And then, okay, well, that's Lucas's take on it, which is nothing wrong with that at all. It's just his approach to things. I think film music has been much more legitimized by Lucas Kendall. I think in terms of people considering it an organized front, I mean, really, there's no film music coalition. You know, half these guys don't know each other. I saw a thing the other day where Danny Elfman was saying, you know, I've never actually met John Williams. I don't know what he's like. He seems like a great guy. And, you know, my first trip out to LA, I expect there'd just be, you know, the Film Music Country Club where you can go over and, you know, sip martinis with, you know, 12 of your favorite composers. But these guys have never met each other. Lucas gave it a public face, not meaning him, but just the kind of umbrella of the magazine.
But I was in Bowling Green, Ohio. I was working at Kinko's. And I was basically making my second stab at college degree.
Jeff's enormously talented, and he seemed kind of wasted in Ohio.
As far as I know, this is an accurate story. Lucas considers himself responsible for getting Jeff out here in the first place.
I'd been reading Lucas's magazine, and there's a letters column in it, so I wrote you know, a letter to Film Score Monthly about this great concert experience that I had, and you know, I described everything that got played.
And he would send in reviews for the magazine when I was at Amherst, and he'd fax them, and they'd arrive with the Kinko's fax cover sheet.
I got my next issue, you know, about a month or so later, so I was sitting down to read, you know, my issue of Film Score Monthly. So I got to this big article, and I looked at the byline and I was like, oh, that's weird, this guy has the same name as me. And then I started reading the article, and I realized that Lucas had printed my letter as an article, like as a big concert review.
And there were these really like literate, well thought out essays about every 60s Jerry Goldsmith score.
So this was like the first time seeing anything I'd written in print. So I just kept writing more and more for the magazine.
It was just me, and then I convinced Jeff Bond to move here with Brooke.
He talked me into coming out to Los Angeles.
I believe it was more along the lines of, come out and write for the magazine. Something like that.
And that was in August '97. And I found him an apartment across the street from me. And then in June '98, I think, we got an office on Wilshire. We shared space with the LA Film Festival at the time.
I've seen pictures, and you could probably, you know, take my arms and hit wall to wall. That was the room into which Jeff and Lucas were stuffed every day.
That was like my first sort of adult job, I guess, although it wasn't really adult. It was just me hanging out with Lucas and reviewing soundtracks.
I think I was right in that age group that got Star Wars, right between the eyes. It came out in '78, so I would have been about 4 or 5 years old when that came out.
Doug is the resident FSMOnline professor. He knows a lot of stuff.
And when I was in college, I ran across this magazine called Film Score Monthly. I thought, well, this is the type of stuff I've been thinking about for years. Maybe I should give this a shot. So somehow I found Lucas Kendall's email over the internet. I forget. I think it was one of the old Usenet groups, which turned into absolute bedlam after a while. But as I dropped him a line, said, give me a shot. Maybe I can do something for you. And just very nonchalant, he wrote me back, said, yeah, here, give Bruce Broughton a call. You can do a piece on young Sherlock Holmes. I know that film. I can do that.
He almost always, brings to bear something that, we didn't think about when it comes to analyzing things. That's why he's so great with the podcast.
So just kind of, out of the blue, sitting in my dorm room, taping it on the answering machine, gave Bruce Broughton a call, and yeah, I'd be happy to help you out. And Bruce is a wonderful, as I've learned over the years, very helpful guy, very friendly, very forthcoming for that type of stuff. So I did the piece, I sent it to Lucas, and he liked it, and hey, do another one. Who did I do next? David Shire, I think, who did The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
He brings a different angle when he interviews composers. It can be a very musical conversation, a very sort of abstract conversation.
After the years, you build up a relationship with these different composers because they remember you as that kid that at least knew what a flute was when he called to ask a question, other than, I guess a lot of fans are, that sounded cool, what was that sound with the thing? And they don't really know what to say, so I guess they were happy that I was a musician and could talk about those things.
But a lot of times Doug wants to get underneath, under the surface, musically speaking.
When I picked up my first issue of Film Score Monthly, I was alternately thrilled and horrified. This was back in the days when it was a black and white Xeroxed or seemingly Xeroxed newsletter that Lucas was producing. I picked it up at a Tower Records in San Francisco. And I found it down in the corner with the tattoo rags, and my heart was beating with excitement at the idea that there was actually a magazine devoted to film music. And then I read the editorial, which was something along the lines of, we don't need no frickin' art direction. And I said, yes you do. And that became my mission for that magazine.
Joe has saved my life. I would not be able to do any of this without Joe.
I wrote to him and I said, do you really want the magazine to look like this on purpose? Or is it just because you don't know any better? Because I'd like to help.
He came in and he took over the art direction. He fixed everything.
We began by my redesigning the magazine, making it new templates in a page layout program so he could have a better looking magazine. And I made a 20-page guide to how to lay out, how to use the program, how to lay out stories, how to give some emphasis. And, tellingly, Lucas would call me up at like 11 o'clock on a Saturday night when you'd think he'd be out partying. He's like, Joe, I'm having trouble with this article. Can you help me out? And he'd email me a layout and I'd fix it for him and send it back. Back when he had done the second volume, he'd gone to color covers and he had actual page layouts that looked sort of like real magazines. He was still putting in about 10 pounds worth of words in a 5-pound bag.
And so Joe spent a lot of time at the beginning, and this is before my time at the magazine. I was just reading. I remember when the first issue came out with Joe's handiwork.
And that was like 10 years ago. I would be out of this. I wouldn't have made it to the year 2000 without Joe.
Lucas sort of started withdrawing himself from the operation of the magazine because he was so involved in the soundtracks and he had other things going on.
When the Kaplan brothers got out of college, I hired John and then I hired Al later to help with the mail order.
The guys who really carried the sort of torch for the magazine being irreverent were John and Al Kaplan.
My father was a composer. He went to Manhattan School of Music, got a master's in composition. Then he ended up going to NYU and became a dentist later on.
but for a few years in between, he was a music teacher and composed during that. And he would always compose on and off, and he would conduct like community bands while he was a dentist. And he found film music on his own when he was 10 or 11 with Alfred Newman and some other guys like that. And he listened to it his whole life. I don't know if I would have discovered it on my own. I think some of it might be genetic, but he certainly exposed it to us. The earliest music I remember is a lot of Miklos Rozsa, and he also had us listening to concert music too, Mahler, other stuff. But that actually helped let me know that I liked film music more, because I was brought up listening to both concert and film music, but it was the film music that I would usually gravitate towards more, and I still do.
They're so into their creative world that there's a part of them that I don't think is ever going to have time to come out to the same kind of mundane reality the rest of us have to deal with. They're just sort of always imagining, and I love that about them. And that's why I was so happy the first time I met them was to see their home movies, because it's kind of like you're either gonna dig these guys, or you're gonna run away from them screaming. And I thought they were brilliant.
I first came to Film Score Monthly in late January of 2000.
Tim we hired because it was like the first time in my adult life I ever hired someone for a job when I didn't know him.
Filmscoremonthly.com was my homepage, and there was a posting one day for managing editor of the magazine because Lucas wanted to get out from under it. And I'm a composer at the same time, so I was like, well, this would be a great gig for me.
He came in, he knew exactly what to do, and we were like, great, you're hired.
I went in there and had an interview with him and met John. I think John said something. He was very gregarious. I think at the time he said something like, hello. And I knew right then that I should come work here.
Tim and I logged a lot of hours. I mean, if you can believe this, we would lay out a 50 or 60 page magazine every 10 weeks, and we would do the last run of work on the phone for 3 hours at a stretch, going through every page. And then Tim would say, okay, left column, 4 or 5 lines from the bottom, put in a semicolon, or put in the colon after Mission Impossible 2. Or no, move it from after Mission Impossible and put it between the mission and impossible.
And this thing had started as a guy's project out of his dorm room. And out of, when you're on the East Coast in your dorm room, you can basically say whatever you want. And that magazine was going out only to fans for a long time. That was the entire readership. So it was a community of people who, were happy to grouse and gripe about things very, very honestly. And they would argue amongst themselves. Nobody necessarily all agreed about any one issue. But it was very much a private conversation among fans. Once we got out here, it became more and more something like an industry magazine, sort of in spite of itself.
You ever see the movie Almost Famous?
Yes.
And the mom keeps getting calls from like all these luminaries of the rock world. I would occasionally get calls at home. I was living at home during grad school, and I'd get calls at home from these people. They ended up getting my parents on the phone. My mom got Quincy Jones called my mom one day, and she completely freaked out. I'm not used to talking to famous people. There's a long pause. She goes, well, I can call back later.
There's certainly a handful of composers who refuse to be interviewed by us. It never seems to be that attitude so much as just like one specific thing that we couldn't really have prevented. Like Jeff Bond is very, very careful about what he says and what he writes, but if he'll give something a bad review, or just even a bad sentence within a review of something that he otherwise liked, if it hits a nerve the wrong way with a sensitive composer, he avoids us or won't talk to us for a year, or in some cases forever.
Danny Elfman is another composer that is on my short list of people that just have called me out of the blue to talk about this or that. And in that case, it was right around the time of Spider-Man 2, when everything sort of collapsed on that and had a lot of trouble with that. I think it was the following summer. I just got home one day, there's a message from him to, hey, Doug, give me a call. As it was actually one where we didn't, even though it was all sort of on the record because he was talking about other things, we didn't run it because I didn't know where is that line between, I'm semi-cordial with Danny Elfman and we can talk about these things, and the other side of that is, okay, is he talking to the journalist guy or just the guy that he's talked to a few times? But I mean, that's been the past few years. I've spent the last couple of years, I always joke saying that I have to, take autographs down off my wall because all these people that I'm, these were my baseball players as a kid. These are the guys that you go out there and root for and you watch the Oscars so you can see just a glimpse of, John Williams' head or something. And, now they happen to be calling you up and asking you things, whatever, and it's a strange situation. You have to go between idolatry and friendship.
I wound up getting in contact with a guy who is sort of like launching a company that makes these model kits, and he's putting out a huge model of the submarine from Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which was my favorite show when I was a kid. And he wound up asking me to basically do like liner notes for the instruction manual for that, and so I get free toys from him, and that's interesting to me. That it's the first time I've actually got to like interact in sort of that world, and I'm just as obsessive and crazy about that whole like toy collecting mentality as I am about film music. So it's sort of interesting to have any interaction in that area too.
Basically, it's a fanboy's dream that motivates a lot of what I do.
I think we're all attracted to the stuff that we discovered when we were younger. So we're all trying to be chasing your first love,
This is my one piece of film music memorabilia that I've hung on to for the past couple of years. This is actually one of the pencils, as far as we know, the only one that actually still exists, that John Williams wrote Star Wars with. Which is either the coolest thing that I own or the dorkiest thing that I own, depending on your point of view. And I just didn't want it to go to somebody that didn't care what it was about. Film music, as we say, is something that's coming together more and more and becoming more respected. But it's kind of an infant. It needs a little bit more care right now. And these are the little magical things by the side of the road that we need to pick up when we see them. So this is my little doodad that I've hung on to.
I'm sort of used to talking to the composers, although I should still be excited about that. And there's a few left who I get to talk to so seldom that it's still exciting. But whenever I talk to an executive, I still feel like it's sort of ridiculous that I'm doing that.
It's sort of this quintessential nerd experience.
I just always go back to the fact that I used to work at Kinko's.
I mean, we all got along very well, and certainly the invitation did eventually come out. You should be out here, especially if you want to write for the magazine. Number one, this is the place to be. Number two, if you want to work as a musician, a composer, performer, whatever, in the film industry, well, you have to be in LA. This is where most of it's happening. And I entertained the idea all through grad school, and ultimately decided, my family's here, I'm very close to them, and I'm ultimately just a Midwestern boy.
I think something I used to tell people who worked for me when we were down in Culver City, I would say, I don't care what your hours are as long as the work gets done. I don't care if you're here at 10 or 11. We're not Walmart, and we're not GE or NBC or anything. I don't care. As long as the work gets done at the right time, do whatever you want.
Fortunately, technology has kind of caught up with what I hoped it would. And you can, send scans or faxes or emails or whatever, audio file, video file, anything, and basically get the job done from wherever you are.
I'm totally hooked into the magazine. I'm helping in the creative process, and I'm guiding its source, and yet I never really meet anybody. I never get out of my room. I just sit up at my desk with my headphones on, listening to the music. It's a strange thing, but it seems to work.
I think in terms of the fans, in terms of serious criticism, in terms of people who are interested in the arts, he sort of brought everything together in that little kernel where you can go, this is the world of film music.
I think I'm less often angry at things because I'm more prepared for negative outcomes. And it's the baseball thing. You know that no matter how good you are, you're going to strike out and pop out. And you're going to be the GOAT just as often as you are the hero. Or, hopefully not as often, but it's unavoidable. You're going to lose sometimes. So as long as you know that you did the process correctly, then you can accept that that's just a part of the random distribution of events.